One of the more common arguments against the validity of the Prophet Muhammad's prophethood is that the critics of Islam, whether they be atheist or Christian, claim claims that the Quran denies that the Prophet Muhammad had miracles. Now, is this true? No, it isn't, because if you read all those verses, they say that the Quran, uh, that according to the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad never performed a miracle. All those verses are basically saying is that the Quran is denying, or Allah is denying specific miracles to specific people. Those specific people being hostile Meccans and hostile Jews, who were around the Prophet Muhammad and kept asking him for a miracle to prove his prophethood. Now, Jesus says the same thing. Jesus denies miracles to the Pharisees in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12 and chapter 16, where Jesus says, "Only a wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign. No sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah." So the Quran's logic is the same as Jesus' logic. Jesus is denying miracles to what he calls a wicked and adulterous, or an evil and adulterous nation. The Quran is doing the same thing. It's denying miracles for wicked and evil people, as Jesus says. Now, anyways, getting to the Quran, well, the critics of Islam, the Christian critics and atheists present. I think they present about, one second. Let me just pull this up here. I think they present about 12 verses that which they claim that deny that the Prophet Muhammad didn't do miracles. So let's go to the first verse. Is the Quran chapter 100, Quran chapter 2, verse 118. 118. It says, "And they that know not say, Why has God not spoken to us? Why does a sign not come to us? Uh, so spoke those before them, as these men say, their hearts are much alike. Yet we have made clear the signs unto a people who are sure." So the question really arises: where does this verse say that the Prophet Muhammad had no miracles? This verse does not say that. The verse is basically quoting what the disbelievers are accusing the Prophet Muhammad. The Quran itself is not quoting this. You know, shall we quote what the Jews said about Jesus and take it as truth? The Jews always claimed that Jesus was demon possessed, that he was a blasphemer, etc., etc. In the Gospel of John and the Gospel of Mark, etc. Of course not. So the the Quran is basically quoting what the disbelievers are saying. The Quran itself is not saying this. Uh, and if you read Ibn Kathir, if you read the commentary of this verse, it says that people before them said the same thing, the Jews and Christians. Uh, you know, so so basically, this verse is saying that the disbelievers are accusing the Prophet Muhammad of doing no miracles. The Quran itself is not saying that, and the Quran is responding to them that even if there's no point in doing it, because even if he does it, they're still not gonna believe in him. What other verse? So notice what the Quran says. It says, "So said people before them words of similar import." So this verse is talking about, before the time of Muhammad, Jews and Christians also said the same thing. Why are there no miracles? Why are there no miracles? And Jesus responded to them by saying, "An evil and adulterous generation asks for a sign. No sign will be given to it." In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12, verse 38 to 39. So this verse does not say that Prophet Muhammad performed no miracles. It only quotes the disbelievers and pagans who are accusing him of performing no miracles. And the Quran clearly states that this is no different from previous people who are also given, prophets. Uh, then what else? What other verses do they bring up? Let me just get this right here. All right. Well, then other critics would cite the Quran chapter 6 verse 37, Quran chapter 6 109, and the Quran chapter 10 verse 20 that showed or they argue that the Prophet Muhammad performed no miracles according to these verses. Well, that's not what it's saying. These verses do not say that the Prophet Muhammad didn't do miracles. All that they're saying is that the pagans were accusing him of performing no miracles. So the Quran is quoting what the disbelievers are saying. The Quran itself is not saying this. Uh, and then the next verse they cite is the Quran chapter 2 verse 145. Now, where in the world does this verse say that the Prophet Muhammad had no miracles? The verse is just talking about the Jews, the stubbornness of the Jews, and that no matter how many miracles no matter how many miracles they get, they're still going to reject the Prophet Muhammad. As Ibn Kathir, who is a very important commentator, a very important Orthodox commentator on the Quran, states. So the Jews are rejecting the Prophet Muhammad, and that even if he gave them all the miracles and wonders they wanted, they still would reject him. So that's the argument. Then critics would quote the Quran chapter 13 verse 7, where it says the unbelievers say, why has a sign not been sent down from his Lord? Thou art only a warner, a guide to every people. Quran chapter 13 verse 7. Now notice what the verse is again saying. The verse is saying that or the verse is quoting what the disbelievers are saying. The Quran itself is not saying this. So the response to them is the Prophet Muhammad is only a warner. Only a warner. That means his duty was just to warn those people, was to just warn the Meccans, or the people he was preaching to, because it's not his job to do miracle after miracle every day. So being only a warner does not mean you are never able to do miracles. That's not what the verse is saying. And then the next verse is the Quran chapter 17 verse 59. And if you read Tafsir ibn Kathir, there's a reason why Allah did not send signs or miracles to those people. And the reason why is because they still wouldn't believe. So if they still didn't believe, then God would have to wipe them out, which God didn't want to do. So that's why that verse was sent down. And again, this is according to the commentary or the tafsir of Ibn Kathir. The next verse is Quran chapter 17 verse 59. Hang on, let me get that to that right now. The Quran chapter 17 verse 59. This verse is basically saying that Allah did not send signs to them because they weren't. If you read the commentary, Tafsir ibn Kathir, the reason why Allah didn't give those specific people around the Prophet Muhammad, the Meccans, the miracle, is because even if they got that miracle, they still wouldn't believe. So that's the reason why that miracle was not sent. That specific miracle was not sent down to them. The next verse they cite is Quran chapter 17 verse 90 to 93. This verse does not say that the Prophet Muhammad had no miracles. All it is saying is that he is a mortal man, and he's not able to generate these miracles himself. He needs God's help to do it. It doesn't. The Quran chapter 17 verse 90 to 93 does not say that the Prophet Muhammad can never do miracles. It was just denying a specific miracle to specific people. And notice what the verse says. It says, "Say, glory be to my Lord. Am I aught but a mortal, a messenger?" So the Prophet Muhammad the Quran is emphasizing Prophet Muhammad's humanity, where he's not able to generate those miracles himself. That verse does not say that the Prophet Muhammad can never do any kind of miracles. The next verse, and Sam Shamoon brought this up, thinking this was a this was a this was a this was the strongest proof that according to the Quran, Prophet Muhammad did no miracles, is the Quran chapter 29, verse 48 to 51. Now, from where does Sam Shamoon get the idea that the Quran is the only miracle? Notice what the Quran chapter 29, verse 48 to 51 says. It says, say the signs are only with God and I am only a plain warner. So we already discussed, being a warner does not mean you can never do miracles in the other verse. So we're not gonna expand on that here. But the important part is this: what is it not enough for them that we have sent down upon the book, which is the Quran, that is recited to them? Now, all the verse is saying is that is it not enough that we sent the Quran down? From where does Sam Shamoon and other critics say this is the only miracle of the Prophet Muhammad? All this verse is saying is that is not the Quran enough for you? You keep asking for miracles and signs, yet the Quran isn't the Quran enough is a enough miracle. That's all it means. It does not mean that the Quran is the only miracle you're going to get. The verse does not say we give you no miracles but the Quran, nor does it say you ask for signs and the Quran is the only, you ask for miracles and the Quran is the only miracle or the only sign. The verse says nothing like that. The Quran is basically saying, or the Quran is basically saying the Quran is enough, is an enough miracle. It is not saying this is all you get, or this is the only miracle you get. The Quran, the Quran is the only miracle. The Quran is basically saying, is this Quran not enough to satisfy, Muhammad's critics or Muhammad's the Meccans around him? So, basically, this is basically in a nutshell, the Quran does not deny that the Prophet Muhammad can never do miracles. All those verses the critics cite, none of those verses say that the Prophet Muhammad can never do miracles. Those verses are just denying specific miracles to specific people. But just because the Quran is denying specific miracles to specific people does not mean that those people were not given a miracle at all. Indeed, the Prophet Muhammad did do miracles, according to the hadith and according to the biographies, Ibn Ishaq, the history of Al-Tabari, etc., etc. So, of course, the Prophet Muhammad did miracles according to, the most authentic biographical sources of the Prophet Muhammad, being, being the hadith, Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, etc., etc. So he did miracles according to those sources. So when the Quran is quoting what the disbelievers are saying, why aren't you doing miracles? Why are there no signs? The Quran responds to them by saying, well, even if you get those miracles, you're still not going to believe. And the Quran is basically saying that the Prophet Muhammad is only a warner and he's only a mortal, and he can't generate those miracles by himself. He needs God's permission, and God is denying miracles to specific miracles to specific people. The reason is the same reason Jesus gives, is because an evil and wicked people ask for miracles, and miracles aren't done for entertainment purposes. They're to strengthen the heart. They're to strengthen the hearts of the believers, not to entertain evil and wicked disbelievers, as Jesus says. So that's the whole point. The Quran is not denying that the Prophet Muhammad didn't do miracles. The Quran is denying specific miracles to specific people, and that's the whole point. So this debunks the argument that the Quran says that the Prophet Muhammad did no miracles. If you read those passages carefully, and if you read the commentaries, that's not the case. So nowhere in the Quran does it say Prophet Muhammad can never do miracles. So this is just my brief response to this argument. Stay tuned. More videos are coming up ahead for the proofs of prophethood.